Most people in downtown Fairview walked faster when they saw him. An old man in a worn brown coat, slightly hunched, gripping a cane that looked as tired as he did. His name was Walter Grayson, 82 years old, lived alone in a faded yellow house 5 blocks from Main Street. To the barista at the corner cafe, he was that guy who never tips. To the school kids passing by, he was just slow. But once, long ago, he wasn't slow at all. Before the cane, before the limp, before the faded green cap with a forgotten patch stitched on the front, Walter had worn a different kind of uniform. He'd been a young soldier stationed in Busan during the Korean War, a combat engineer, a man who had dug, built, and patched roads under mortar fire to keep supply lines open. He never talked about it, didn't attend reunions, didn't keep his medals on display. He didn't need to be remembered, or so he told himself. That morning, the sun was especially harsh, bright, unkind, casting shadows that made the sidewalk look like a battlefield of broken glass. Walter had ventured out to get groceries. He made it halfway through the crosswalk before the light changed. That's when it began. Cars honked. Engines revved. One driver leaned out and shouted, "Move it, Grandpa!" Walter froze. His cane wobbled. His vision blurred under the brim of his cap. He didn't need help. At least, that's what pride told him. But his knees disagreed. People on both sidewalks stood watching. A young mother pulled her child back. A cyclist zipped around him, muttering something under his breath. And still, no one moved. Time slowed. The kind of slow that felt familiar to Walter, like the seconds before the shelling started. But this time, there was no bunker to dive into. Just cracked pavement, judgmental eyes, and the quiet, growing fear that maybe this was how it would end. Alone, in the middle of a street. Too slow for this world. And then, just as the next wave of horns blared, a figure stepped off the curb. Not rushed, not panicked, deliberate, focused. A young man in military dress blues. Maybe 22, 23 years old. And he was walking straight toward Walter. But not just walking. He knelt, right there in the middle of the street. One knee to the asphalt, one hand reaching out. And in that moment, everything stopped. Walter blinked against the sun, trying to focus. The young man in uniform was still kneeling, one hand extended, the other resting over his heart, right where the insignia of the United States Marine Corps shone proudly on his blues. Dark-skinned, clean-shaven, with sharp eyes full of something that Walter hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. "Sir," the young Marine said, calm and steady, "may I walk with you?" Walter hesitated. His first instinct was to wave him off. "I'm fine, son," he nearly muttered. But the words caught somewhere between pride and fear. Because truthfully, he wasn't fine. His legs had grown weaker over the past year. His breath shorter. And after his wife passed, there was no one left to lean on, just the cane and the memories. So when this stranger offered his hand, Walter did something he hadn't done in decades. He accepted help. The Marine rose to his feet, not with urgency, but with reverence. Not like a man rushing at shore, but like a man walking beside a flag. And as they began to move together, slowly, carefully, something unexpected happened. The traffic stopped. A city bus powered down. Drivers stepped out of cars, watching in silence. A street musician put down his saxophone mid-note. Phones came out, not to mock, but to capture. Not because Walter was famous, but because in that single moment, something sacred was happening. Walter shuffled one step, then another. Each movement felt steadier. The Marine didn't rush him. He matched Walter's pace, perfectly in sync, like a soldier following his commander through fire. Halfway across the street, Walter found his voice. "What's your name, son?" he asked, his breath shallow. "Private First Class Jordan Hayes, sir," the young man replied. "My grandfather used to talk about men like you. Said you built the bridges they crossed under fire." Walter glanced up, surprised. He served? "Yes, sir. 2nd Battalion. Korea." He never forgot. Walter's lips parted slightly. The 2nd Battalion had been stationed near his unit. For a second, he wondered, had he and this boy's grandfather shared the same dirt, the same fear? Had he saved a road that carried this young man's legacy home? At the edge of the sidewalk, Jordan stopped. He didn't release Walter's arm until the older man was fully stable. And then, instead of stepping away, he saluted. A crisp, clean, full salute. Right there on the city street. People watching followed suit, some awkwardly placing hands over hearts, others bowing their heads. Walter tried to return the gesture, his hand trembling toward his brow. But the Marine stepped forward and gently lowered it. "You don't salute me, sir," he said, voice cracking just slightly. "I salute you." Tears welled in Walter's tired eyes. Not from pain, not from age, but from something he thought the world had forgotten. Honor. And that day, in the middle of a crosswalk no one wanted to step into, he was seen, not as a burden, not as a relic, but as a man who had once carried a country's hope on his back and still stood. By the time Walter and Private Hayes stepped onto the far sidewalk, the crowd behind them had grown quiet. No more honking, no more impatience, just stillness and the quiet hum of something sacred, awareness. The moment had been filmed by at least 3 bystanders. One of them, a local high school teacher named Ms. Lerner, posted the short clip with a caption. "This Marine just honored a man the world had forgotten. We need more moments like this." She added 2 words that would echo across the country. #HonorLives. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. Veteran groups shared it. News stations picked it up. Even the official account of the U.S. Marines reposted it with a simple caption. "We don't leave our heroes behind. Not on the battlefield. Not on the sidewalk." But while the world watched the screen, Walter had no idea. He was home by then, back in his yellow cottage, seated in his worn armchair, the events of the day swirling slowly through his mind. He hadn't spoken to anyone about the war in decades. Not even to his late wife, Margaret. Not about the bridge he built under enemy fire. Not about the friend he carried on his back across a minefield. Not about the medals he kept hidden in a shoebox beneath his bed. He had locked it all away. Until today, because for the first time in years, someone had looked at him, not as a fragile old man, but as a soldier who once stood tall. And it lit something inside him. The next morning, Walter opened the shoebox, pulled out a stack of photos, a bronze star, a field journal with dirt still in the pages, and a folded letter from 1953, written by a young private who hadn't made it home. He stared at the letter for a long time. And then, slowly, he picked up the phone. He dialed the number of the local high school and asked for Ms. Lerner, the teacher who had posted the video. She recognized his voice instantly and began crying. "Mr. Grayson, people are asking about you. There's a Veterans Appreciation Assembly next week. Would you come?" Walter hesitated, then said the most unexpected word. "Yes." By the time the school gym filled that Friday, the town of Fairview had changed. Shop windows had printed out stills of the now-famous video. Veteran flags were flown on every light pole. A new crosswalk sign had been installed downtown, featuring the silhouette of a Marine kneeling beside an older man. The mayor declared it Walter Grayson Day. But Walter didn't walk into that gym seeking applause. He came holding something else, his cane in one hand, Private Hayes beside him, and in his other hand, the letter. He stood at the microphone, cleared his throat, and for the first time in his life, told the full story. The day he risked everything for a fellow soldier. The night he thought he'd never make it home. The promise he made to the dying young man whose hand he held until the last breath. "I never wanted recognition," he told the silent crowd. "I just wanted to live a life that made his sacrifice worth it." When he finished, the entire gym stood. Not a dry eye in the room. And in the back, Private Hayes saluted again. This time joined by 6 other Marines who had driven from nearby bases to thank the man they now called Doc Grayson. That video on the sidewalk had started a wave. But Walter's story? It became a movement. Monday after the assembly, Fairview felt different. Walter Grayson's name was on everyone's lips, not as gossip, but as reverence. At the diner where he used to sip coffee unnoticed, the waitress now poured his cup before he even sat down. Across town, kids who once rushed past him on their bikes now slowed down just to wave. And it wasn't just respect. It was remembrance. A local carpenter named Ben Salas built a custom bench right at the corner where Walter had once stood waiting alone. On the backrest, engraved in smooth walnut, were the words, "For the ones who once carried us, we now carry you." Flowers began appearing there each morning. Sometimes a note, sometimes a miniature flag. But more than that, something deeper began to take root. Fairview High started a mentorship program where veterans would meet with students every Friday, sharing life lessons, not just war stories. One senior, Maya Jennings, scrapped her original college essay and wrote instead, The day a Marine helped an old man cross the street was the day I understood what honor really means. She got into her dream school with a scholarship. At the same time, parents began teaching their kids something different. Not just to say thank you for your service, but to ask, how are you doing? To listen, to see. And Walter? He became a fixture again, but not of pity. He spoke at Rotary Club meetings, at scout troops. Even at the VFW hall, he hadn't stepped foot in for 30 years. At each talk, he never led with his medals. He led with the sidewalk, and the young man who knelt without cameras, without orders, simply because it was right. I didn't serve to be remembered, he'd often say. But being remembered, it heals something you didn't know was broken. As for Private Hayes, he returned to base, but not before stopping by Walter's home one last time. He brought with him a folded American flag, a framed photograph of Walter from his early days in uniform, and a handwritten letter. Dear Mr. Grayson, you taught me that real service doesn't end with discharge. It continues with kindness, with humility, with how we show up when no one's watching. I'll carry that lesson forward, always. Semper Fi, Jordan. Walter framed the letter and placed it beside the photo of his late wife. And every evening, when the light hit just right, the gold ink shimmered, like a metal forged not from battle, but from grace. It's been a year now since Walter Grayson stood on that street corner, cane in hand, the world rushing by. He still walks slower than most, still wears the same wool cap, still talks more with his eyes than with his voice. But no one rushes past him anymore. Instead, they pause. They offer a hand. They ask about the bench, the medal, the moment. And Walter, humble as ever, just smiles and says, that day didn't change my life. It reminded me it still mattered. The town of Fairview declared March 12th, the date of the Crosswalk moment, as Honor Lives Day, a local holiday encouraging simple acts of respect. Schools host essay contests. Veterans read poetry. Teens deliver groceries to retired service members they never knew before. Private Hayes, now Sergeant Hayes, returned to speak at the next year's celebration. Standing beside Walter, he addressed a packed gymnasium of young people, parents, and veterans. We don't need statues to remember people like Mr. Grayson, he said. We just need to notice them while they're still with us. The gym fell silent, not out of sadness, but reverence. Later that afternoon, Walter visited the crosswalk again. Alone, he stood at the edge, waiting, not to cross, but just to watch. And that's when it happened. A little boy and his mother approached the opposite curb. The boy tugged her sleeve and pointed. Mom, he said, that's the man the Marine helped. He's like a hero, right? His mother nodded. Yes, sweetheart. He's exactly that. Walter heard every word. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He simply lowered his head for a moment, as if honoring all those who never made it back to hear such words. And then he turned, step by step, and made his way home.
If this story touched your heart, we'd be honored to have you with us. Each day we share quiet moments that remind us what still matters. You can subscribe below to join us.